All right. Hi, George.
Hi.
Hello to everybody
So,
at Startup Grind. Sorry I can't be with you live.
yes. So today is a very interesting day. It's a collaboration for the Global Entrepreneurship Network Week event. Today we'll be having a marathon with different startup grind events across the world. And today we have 15 minutes with Yi. So um, I'd like to dive in straight to the question. And I think one of the key things that we cannot ignore right now is that there's a huge AI AI boom that is going out in the world. So how can African founders who are in the emerging market leverage and build effective AI solutions despite the limited um, resources and infrastructure challenges that can be in Africa?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this AI boom is really going to level the playing field because it really doesn't matter where you are in the world, right? Now all you have to do is you go on ChatGPT, you ask it some questions, it's going to tell you as well as a professor here at Stanford, right? How the thing
Yes,
works. So,
yes,
um, and also with coding, the massive improvements that things like Copilot, Cursor add to your workflow. So I think it's going to be a very big leveling factor for people building startups all over the world, right? You really,
yes,
I think the sort of, if you think about like the eras, right? You had to be here, right? You had to be
yes,
in a developed economy to,
yes,
okay, well, now we have the internet. So now you can see things online, right? But it's still like you're
yes,
still not getting the full thing. To then
yes,
saying, okay, well, now you have YouTube. So now you can like get
yes,
all the startup knowledge possible. And now it's like you don't even need to watch the whole YouTube video because ChatGPT can just summarize it for you. So
yes,
so I think it's going to be a really big democratizing factor for startups all over the world.
yes. And one key, like huge worry for most of the like experts in now, like I can see maybe this is happening all over where now like you can see professionals are worried of like their jobs being taken. Now I can imagine that like maybe in a developed country versus now even in a developing country people are like there's the worry of AI taking their jobs. So what kind of insights would you have around that that concern?
Yeah, I mean that's what happens with any kind of transformative technology, right? So
Yes,
the question is, are you going to be the one who has their job taken, or are you going to be the one taking and creating new
the job.
jobs, right? Um,
Yes,
Same thing happened when we first had the Industrial Revolution. People said, "Oh, well, now, look, you have these machines and they can do the things that humans used to have to do by hand, or you have to have animals do by hand, in the fields or in the factories." But what happened, right? It was a great growth of productivity, and there were many,
yes,
many more jobs that were created out of that, right? So the hope is with the AI boom, we're also going to see a huge amount of new job creation. In fact, I think in a lot of ways we already have, right? So um, there's a lot of things that now, once again, folks in different parts of the world can do globally.
amazing. And what approaches should founders take when adopting AI solutions for their customers?
Yeah, I think, one thing that the AI boom doesn't change is the fundamentals of a startup, right? You still ultimately have to build a product that people are willing to pay money for. At the end of the day, that is not changed. So if I'm a founder, if I were a founder, no matter where I was in the world today, I would still think, who are my customers? How am I going to get them to pay me? Right? This is the fundamental thing that is not going to change. So there's last year, especially a lot of people were like, oh, well, that's just a ChatGPT wrapper. That's a ChatGPT wrapper. It's not, there's no defensible moat. Well, some of those companies became, you know, they had lots and lots of revenue. Lots of people were willing to pay them, right? And so those became really
Yes.
interesting companies. At the same time, you have other people who maybe are building some very, very, very complex technical solutions. Maybe they spent 10 million, 20 million, $100 million on building a new model, but nobody's that interested in using it, right? So um, when it comes to startups, that doesn't change. You have to have customers who are willing to pay.
That's that's a, that's an awesome perspective of it, um, and something that every startup founder should consider when they are building their own startup. So, what are what are some of the strategies of balancing between building local needs and also like there's like maintaining the global competitiveness, noting that now like AI and the internet have brought like the global market to to, to make like now your consumer like a global kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So now it's easier than ever to sell globally, right? So that's really
Yes,
good news when it's time to scale, right? Like
yes,
when you have a product that's really useful, people want to pay for it, they want to buy it. Um, no matter where you are in the world, you can sell to the biggest markets. You can sell to the Americans, you can sell to the Asian market, you can sell to the European market, you can sell to the African market, right? Um,
yes,
so that's really good news. And where I see companies have success, though, is they first need to target something unique locally, right? Your first customers
yes,
are most likely not going to be halfway across the world, right? Your first customers most likely are going to be on your street. So you have to do something that's going to help the people on your street first. But then
yes,
when it comes time to scale, yeah, it's great. It's better than ever, right? Like all those barriers before, whether it's payments or even just like translation, knowing the language, those are no longer barriers, right? You don't have to hire
yes,
somebody to translate your application into a bunch of different languages. You can just use AI to do it now.
yes. So, what are the key like uh, key components when building technical expertise in AI?
Well, so I think one key question that people need to think about is what layer are you building on, right? So there's people who are building on the infrastructure layer, right? Literally very successfully building data centers, right? Buying GPUs and renting GPUs, right? So that's sort of like the bottom layer that we see a lot of startups in. Then you have the layer on top of that, which is like, okay, we're going to be building models, right? We're building our own
Yes,
models of some sort. Maybe it's because it has better language support for certain things, or maybe it's because, there's a specific application that you want, right? Like a specific domain. Maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's legal. So that's another layer that you can build on top of. I personally think the most interesting layer is the application layer. It's the layer that's on top of all of this. It's saying, okay, we have all these wonderful tools in the layers below. Now, how do we use them to actually benefit the users? Um, I personally think that's the most interesting layer. But depending on your personal preference and your expertise, I think you can make an interesting business in all three layers.
Yeah, so that's a very a great approach. So with AI, one has to collect data. One of the things that African, startups also struggle with is like limited data sources for the African market. So, what are the best frameworks to collect and manage data in regions with also limited data and also infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean we're getting better at it, right? Like the open source data, we have way more than we used to have, right? There's way more data sets, much better curated, much better tagged, cleaned, right? So that's an area that we've gotten better over time. It's nowhere perfect, right? And if like
Yeah.
let's say if you wanted to say, build a competitor to OpenAI, there's no way around it. You have to collect your own data in huge quantity. Um, so it's not perfect, but it's gotten a lot better. It's gotten a lot better over the years. And same with models, right? So like model weights, we've seen a lot of model weights being open sourced, and that's fantastic. I'd love to see more model data and model training infrastructure being open sourced. We haven't seen that yet, but hopefully some of the folks who have made a large investment, but maybe, the model isn't state of the art anymore, will start doing some of that work.
Cool. And just a just a very random question that popped up in my head is that one of the key things you mentioned is um, having an audience that is willing to pay for your solution. So we see most of African founders, like let's say, um, wanting to go into tech because it's like very interesting at the moment. So can you tell us about some of the opportunities to monetize with AI technology, maybe for emerging markets?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, so um, so like a very sort of obvious thing right now is that there's a shortage of talent, right?
Yes.
This stuff isn't hard. It's not hard to learn, but the number of software developers who have actually learned how to use LLMs, I would say it's probably like less than 10% in the world right now, right? But pretty much every company wants to build something with LLMs. So, um, so that's like one area where like there's just literally a talent shortage, right? And so if somebody's able to skill folks up quickly, then that could be a really interesting thing for a lot of companies, right? Um, and up and down the stack, right? Like obviously, we know, for example, that a lot of the reinforcement learning was done uh, by Africans, right? For
Yeah.
GPT models, right? And that's a skill that maybe it's a little bit easier to pick up. But then you go a little bit higher, and it's like, okay, well, now you need folks who can actually go and clean and analyze the data, right? And then you go a little bit further up, and it's like, okay, well, now you need folks who can, you know, make computer programs to handle all of this data, right? So, and then you go further up, and it's like, okay, now you need folks who can build these models. So all up and down the skill level, I think there's massive opportunities. There's a huge shortage of people still to actually build all of the things that we want to build, right? So, Andrew Ng said like, AI is the new electricity, right? So you have to think about like, nowadays it's like, okay, yeah, everybody understands electricity, right? You can everybody can plug a TV into the wall, but back in the day, it was new technology, right? And only a small fraction of the people understood how to use it. Um, in very similar way, I think that's true for AI as well, right? So there's lots of opportunities up and down the stack, and yeah, I think there's going to be some really, really good market opportunities for folks who can provide those kinds of services.
Yes. So I think now based of now let's say like you're based off like the center of um where all this is happening. And now for me, like my perspective building here in Africa, like most of the things that I've seen that are impacting the technology of how like people do this is like key partnerships. So let's say like you see where you're saying there's opportunities and a huge skill gap. So key partnerships from companies like maybe let's say Google who are building maybe in healthcare and they kind of involve like through things like events, hackathons, they involve like devs when building this. There's like also like raising awareness with like kind of educational initiatives for this. So with this, we are also seeing like skepticism with AI, where some of the big giants are also like a bit more skeptic when using AI. Maybe also like discouraging people through the layoffs that are happening. So, what key partnerships you know do you see or do you feel like should be there to boost the emerging market?
Yeah, I would say that the number one thing is not to wait for Google or for OpenAI or for any of these folks to come in. I would say the key thing is to build the community yourself, and then they will come, right? Like hackathons are amazing, right? We have a hackathon once a week here in the Bay Area, maybe twice a week,
Yeah.
depending on the week, right? Um,
Yeah.
and it's we call it a hackathon, but really it's a learnathon. You go to these things and you meet people and you learn about the new
Yes.
technologies. Um,
Yes.
so that's the kind of community that I would like to see folks all around the world build. And like you don't have to have anybody build it for you. Just do it yourself, right? Just get people together and reach out to people on LinkedIn and say, hey, do you want to come zoom in onto into our hackathon? Do you want to give us some credits so that people can try your stuff out? And you'll find that people are very interested in doing that kind of thing right now. So don't wait for them to reach out to you, reach out to them. And I'd like to end it there because I think that is absolutely the most important thing. It's like the community here in SF, it, it wasn't OpenAI who built the community. Like it was the folks here who just got excited and built it themselves. Right. Obviously, having OpenAI here helps because they can provide credits, they can provide speakers and that sort of thing. But it was really an organic thing. Um, and so I really hope after this conversation, I hope that we'll see many, many of you go and build the community in your communities.